Someone I deeply respect told me that he spends the vast majority of his Monday planning the rest of his week. That sounds a bit crazy. I mean, devoting almost 20% of your week to planning the rest of your week seems like a lot of time to invest in planning. However, he was a very productive and effective person, and I think that's part of why he was effective. That he was spending time up front making sure that he was only working on the most crucial tasks. And that is part of the weekly review. It's a strategy that comes out of David Allen's book, Getting Things Done. The idea is that you review what you achieved in the last week, you plan the week ahead, and importantly, you compare your progress against your long-term goals. The reason why it's worthwhile doing it is that instead of starting the week in a bit of a flurry where you've had your weekend and then you're getting back into the week and you're not really sure what to do first, and maybe you just do easy things first, just answer emails for the whole of Monday, you can get into this cycle where you're very busy but you're not very effective. By doing the weekly review, you get very clear about what are the highest payoff actions that are going to move you forward towards your long-term goals. In some cases, this may involve pivoting your priorities. It might have been that the things you were working on last week have been revealed to not actually be the most important. That in order to achieve your objectives for the quarter, you may need to do something quite different. And by taking that time to reflect and review, you're able to actually plan what is going to be the most effective thing to do. The way to implement it is basically to set some time aside each week. And it may be that you do it first thing on a Monday, or last thing on a Friday, or it could be on a Sunday evening. I find for me, Sunday evenings are the best time slot, but for people with families, that may not be a good time. You want to choose a time where you're going to have at least half an hour and ideally more time. The first time you do it, it's going to take quite a lot of time. You're going to want to have a process to follow, which may involve following a checklist. And you're going to want to be consistent about when you do it. In terms of what would be involved in the checklist, there's about 5 things that I like to do. The first one is to clear out the clutter, which means starting with the inbox, which could be the email inbox, or it could be pieces of paper on your desk, going through them, figuring out what do you need to do next. I often find that I have flagged emails that should actually be translated into items in my to-do list. And by spending some time on this Sunday afternoon when I do it, I'm able to move them out of my inbox and into an appropriate slot in my to-do list, which may not be for several months in some cases. The other thing is potentially, if you're dealing with paper receipts, you probably want to potentially scan them and get them into your bookkeeping or expense management system. You want to look at your to-do list and think about which of the items in the list are still relevant. If there are tasks which you have either done or which have revealed themselves to no longer be important, you can remove them. And it's also helpful to go through and look at notes that you've taken throughout the week, maybe from meetings or from daily journaling, and process those notes. There might be actions inside them, or you may want to put them into your long-term information storage management system, aka your second brain. Once you've done that, I like to track my progress. I enjoy recording key metrics. There's that quote from Peter Drucker, what gets measured gets managed. So I like to measure metrics relating to my fitness, my career, my relationships, and my finances. So for fitness, I like to run or measure or track how many kilometers I ran that week. And so I can see over time, am I doing enough training? And am I also taking appropriate rest weeks as well? How many weight sessions did I do? For my career, how much time have I spent on value creation, which for me involves writing code, having interviews with customers, planning the roadmap for my product versus administrivia. There can be a lot of tasks that could be delegated to someone else or just don't need to be done at all. For relationships, I'm married and I can sometimes let my career get in the way of time with my wife, which isn't great. So I like actually getting very clear on how much time have I spent with my wife this week, because there's a pretty close correlation between quality time and relational satisfaction. And the same thing with my friends. And then with finances, how much did I spend this week? And I don't do it every week, but maybe once per month update my net worth, and that can help to calibrate actions around changing what I'm spending money on and how I'm investing. I'm not saying that you have to use these exact categories or these metrics when you're doing your tracking, but something analogous to this is probably useful to make sure that you are on track for your long-term goals. Speaking of long-term goals, it's important to review them. I'm not talking about necessarily doing a new vision board or setting 6-month goals every week. It's more about looking at goals that you have set, potentially at the start of the year or the start of the quarter, and reflecting on how you're progressing. Because without that, I find that I can get into this state of inertia where I keep doing what I was doing the week before, rather than reflecting on how am I going against the objectives that I set for this quarter. Do I need to do something quite different? And also, which area needs the most focus this week? Because I might have 10 different goals, but it could be that I'm actually crushing it with my fitness, whereas I haven't been doing that great with my household maintenance, for example. And by getting clear on where I'm at with each of those goals, I can allocate an appropriate amount of time and energy in this week. The other thing is to check my calendar. What commitments do I have in this week? How is that going to influence the amount of time that I have for deep work and value creation? And what big events do I have coming up that I need to prepare for? It might be that I'm giving a conference talk and maybe I haven't done enough preparation to this date. And so I'll actually need to carve out a significant amount of time this week to prepare for that. And then also, what seems irrelevant? Maybe I've got meetings that I agreed to that I actually can cancel or not show up for or postpone because I have more important things to do this week. Finally, setting priorities. There are multiple areas that are important in my life, not just career, relationships, fitness, health. I do want to have one key thing in each area so that I'm moving ahead in all areas of my life. I'll find that one thing and then I'll break it down, because often if it's a larger piece of work, it can feel overwhelming. But if I break it down into bite-sized chunks, that makes it much easier to start that task. And then I can update my to-do list and my calendar to make sure that it does get done. Importantly, I don't want to overload myself. I don't want to schedule every minute of the week ahead, because there are going to be contingencies that come up. And if there isn't slack in the schedule, then that's going to be uncomfortable. In terms of how long and when to do it, I spoke about that a bit previously, that you want to do it at a consistent time each week. I do find that if it's been a while since I've done my weekly review, I probably have a stack of notes and my inbox is probably very cluttered. It's going to take a bit longer that time, but once I'm in a consistent rhythm, it doesn't take as long, and as little as 30 minutes may suffice. A few other things that may come in handy. In terms of planning, I like to break down my time horizon so that during the month, I'm only thinking about the goals for the month, but then at the end of the month, I'm going to look back at my quarterly goals and recalibrate the goals for the month ahead. And then the same at the end of the quarter. And that's going to mean that those sessions will be longer, because if I'm planning my goals for the next quarter, that's going to take a fair bit of reflection It may end up doubling or tripling the amount of time required, but that is well worth it because when we have a clear direction, we're going to go in the right direction. The other thing that I find helpful is I tie this weekly review in with meeting with my accountability group. That's part of the reason that I do my review on a Sunday, because I have a call with my accountability group each Sunday early evening, and I share what my key actions for the week ahead are, just as they share what theirs are. And that accountability I find quite useful. I hope you enjoy the clarity that comes out of this process. It does take a bit of time, but it is well worth it, because otherwise we can be very busy but not really get in the direction we want to go.